Jack Smith's attorneys writing this, quote, given the many mischaracterizations of Mr. Smith's investigation into President Trump's alleged mishandling of classified documents and his role in attempting to overturn the results of the 2020 election, Mr. Smith respectfully requests the opportunity to testify in open hearings before the House and Senate Judiciary Committees. Jack Smith's team added just one caveat, quote, he's prepared to answer questions about the special counsel's investigation and prosecution, but he requires assurance from the Department of Justice that he will not be punished for doing so. Jack Smith is making this offer to testify in full view publicly because and after Republicans have alleged for weeks now that Jack Smith's team unlawfully tapped the phone records of members of Special Counsel Jack Smith is telling Republicans, game on. In a letter just released from his attorneys to Congressman Jim Jordan and Senator Chuck Grassley, the chairs of the House and Senate Judiciary Committee, Jack Smith is offering to testify, but he wants to do so in a public hearing about the investigations he conducted.
Okay, so Jack Smith just pulled off something that nobody saw coming. In Trump world, they're absolutely losing their minds over it. Here's the deal. Most people think Jack Smith is done. Case closed. Trump won the election, got back into the White House, and the whole DOJ prosecution just went away. End of story, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Because what Jack Smith actually did was way more dangerous for President Trump than anyone realized. He didn't give up. He didn't surrender. He changed strategies. And what he's doing right now is basically building a legal time bomb that's set to go off the second Trump leaves office. We're talking about a counterattack that could haunt Trump for years, maybe decades. And the best part, or worst part, depending on how you see it, there's nothing Trump can do to stop it while he's in office. Smith made sure of that. He played this perfectly. And now Trump's lawyers are scrambling to figure out how to defuse a bomb that's already been armed and locked into place. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
In the criminal election interference case against former President Donald Trump.
Smith and prosecutors have until 5 p.m. Eastern time to file the extensive dossier to the federal judge. It may contain new evidence connected to Donald Trump's alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election.
Let me break down what actually happened here, because the headlines don't tell you the full story. They say Jack Smith dropped the cases. They say Trump won. They say it's over, but that's not what happened at all. What Smith did was dismiss the federal cases without prejudice. And if you don't know what that means, it's huge. It means the charges can come back. It means the evidence stays on the record. It means this whole thing can be refiled the second Trump is no longer president. Smith didn't drop the case because he thought Trump was innocent. He dropped it because DOJ policy says you can't prosecute a sitting president. But the moment Trump's term ends, all bets are off. The immunity is temporary. The evidence is permanent. And Smith made absolutely sure everyone knows it. But wait, it gets even better. Smith didn't just dismiss the cases and walk away quietly. He filed a massive final report. We're talking hundreds of pages laying out all the evidence against Trump. The January 2025 report on election interference said the evidence compelled prosecution. Not suggested, not indicated, compelled. As in, the proof was so strong that charging Trump was basically mandatory. Smith laid out everything. The pressure campaign on state officials, the fake elector scheme, the January 6th planning, all of it, in excruciating detail. And that report is public. It's on the record, and it's not going anywhere. So even though Trump isn't on trial right now, even though he's not facing criminal charges at this exact moment, the entire case against him is documented, preserved, and ready to go whenever the political winds shift. And here's where it gets wild. The New York Times reported this month that Smith has moved from defense to counterattack. He's not hiding. He's not running scared. He's actually welcoming the chance to lay out his case in public hearings and legal briefs. What was once a criminal prosecution has now turned into a long-term accountability campaign. Smith is positioning himself and his evidence for the moment Trump loses power. And when that happens, whether it's in 2029 or whenever, all of this comes roaring back. The charges, the evidence, the whole thing. It's like Smith looked at the Supreme Court's immunity ruling and said, okay, you want to give Trump temporary protection? Fine, I'll just wait. And while I'm waiting, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what he did and exactly how to prosecute him when the time comes. Now, Trump's people, they see what's happening and they're panicking, because this isn't just about legal exposure for Trump. This is about everyone around him too. All the lawyers who helped with the fake electors, all the officials who went along with the pressure campaigns, all the advisors who were in those meetings planning how to overturn the election. Smith's reports names, they describe actions, they lay out conspiracies, and all of that stays on the record, ready to be used against anyone involved the moment prosecutorial priorities change. This is a ticking time bomb for the entire Trump operation, and the fuse is already lit. But there's more, because while Smith's election interference report went public, there's a second report that nobody's allowed to see. The classified documents case report. Smith finished it, submitted it to DOJ, but Judge Eileen Cannon, the Trump-appointed judge who's been protecting him throughout this whole thing, she sealed it completely. Even Congress can't see it, and watchdog groups are now suing to force it open, arguing that blocking even congressional oversight only heightens the need for transparency about what Trump did with national security secrets. Think about that. There's an entire report sitting there, potentially hundreds more pages of evidence about Trump hoarding classified documents, refusing to return them, obstructing justice, and it's locked away for now. But how long before that seal breaks, because that report isn't going away either. It's just waiting. This is the setup for Trump's potential third act in court. Everything Smith did, the reports, the without prejudice dismissals, the public statements, it all serves one purpose: lock in the record, preserve the evidence, make sure that when Trump's immunity expires, there's a complete roadmap for bringing these cases back. And not just for prosecutors, for Congress too, for state attorneys general, for anyone with jurisdiction who wants to hold Trump accountable. Smith built them a playbook, and he made sure it can't be erased or ignored or swept under the rug. This isn't over, not by a long shot. It's just paused. And the second Trump leaves office, everything Smith documented comes back into play. Every charge, every piece of evidence, every witness, it's all there, waiting. So buckle up, because what we're about to break down is how Jack Smith turned a legal defeat into a strategic victory, and how Trump's immunity might be the thing that ends up destroying him once it runs out. All right, let's dig into what Smith actually did here, because this is where most people get confused. They hear Jack Smith drop the cases, and they think that means Trump got away with it, that justice failed, that the powerful always win. And yeah, I get why people think that, but that's not the full picture. What Smith did was play the long game, and if you understand the strategy, it's actually brilliant, terrifying for Trump, but brilliant. Let's start with the basics. When Trump won the 2024 election and got ready to take office again, Smith had a problem. DOJ has this long-standing policy: you can't prosecute a sitting president. It goes back to the Nixon era. The reasoning is that criminal prosecution would interfere with the president's ability to do the job. So even though Smith had built these massive cases, the election interference case, the classified documents case, he couldn't actually take Trump to trial once Trump became president again. So what were Smith's options? He could have let the cases sit there, inactive, waiting for Trump's term to end, but that would have been risky. Trump's new attorney general could just dismiss them with prejudice, meaning they couldn't be refiled. Or Trump could pardon himself, which would have created this whole constitutional crisis, where evidence could disappear, witnesses could recant, memories could fade. 4 years is a long time in legal terms. Or Smith could do what he did, dismiss the cases himself, but do it strategically. Dismiss them without prejudice, which preserves the right to refile. Document everything in detailed public reports, make the evidence part of the permanent record, and position the whole thing as temporary, not permanent. That's exactly what he did, and it was the smartest play available, because now Smith controls the narrative. He's the one who preserved the cases for the future. He's the one who made sure Trump's immunity is explicitly described as temporary. And he's the one who created the blueprint for what comes next. The January 2025 final report is the key to understanding this. Smith released Volume 1, which covers the election interference investigation, and it's devastating. The report says the evidence compelled prosecution for Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election, not suggested prosecution, not made prosecution reasonable, compelled it. That's the strongest possible language Smith could use. And then he backs it up with details, hundreds of pages describing Trump's pressure campaign on state officials, the fake elector scheme in 7 states, the January 6 planning meetings, the attempts to use the Justice Department to declare the election fraudulent, the whole thing. And here's what makes it so dangerous for Trump. Smith doesn't just describe what happened. He explains why it's criminal. He cites the relevant statutes. He breaks down the elements of each crime and shows how Trump's actions fit. This isn't just a historical record. It's a prosecution memo. It's exactly what a future prosecutor would need to refile charges and take Trump to trial. And Smith made sure to include something else critical in his filings. When he asked the court to dismiss the cases, he explicitly argued that Trump's immunity is temporary, not permanent. Temporary. He said the dismissal was necessary because of Trump's current position, not because the evidence was weak or the case was flawed. He preserved the legal argument that once Trump leaves office, he can be prosecuted for acts committed before and during his presidency. That's huge, because the Supreme Court's immunity ruling the one that basically said presidents have broad immunity for official acts. It doesn't clearly address what happens after a president leaves office. There's ambiguity there, and Smith's filings stake out the position that post-president's prosecution is absolutely still on the table. He's basically telling future prosecutors, here's your legal theory, here's your evidence, here's how you do this, and he's telling Trump, your immunity has an expiration date. Now, let's talk about what Trump and his allies are doing in response, because they see the danger here, and they're trying to spin this as a vindication. Trump's been claiming the cases were dropped because they were weak, because Smith knew he couldn't win, because the whole thing was a witch hunt from the start. But that's not what Smith's reports say at all. Smith's reports say the opposite, that the evidence was overwhelming and prosecution was necessary. The cases were dropped because of a legal technicality about presidential immunity, not because Trump was innocent. And that distinction matters, because public opinion isn't always swayed by legal technicalities. If Smith's evidence gets aired in congressional hearings, if journalists dig into the reports, if future prosecutors start talking about refiling, the narrative shifts. Suddenly, it's not Trump won, case closed. It's Trump got temporary protection, but the evidence says he's guilty, and this isn't over. That's a very different story, and it's the story Smith wants to tell. But here's where things get even more interesting. The classified documents case, Smith finished his final report on that case too, Volume 2, they're calling it, but Judge Eileen Cannon, who's been criticized throughout this whole process for ruling in Trump's favor at every turn, she sealed it. She issued an order blocking the report's release to Congress and the public. In her reasoning, she said it would prejudice Trump's rights in potential future proceedings. Think about the irony there. She's blocking a report that might justify future prosecutions by arguing it could prejudice those future prosecutions. It's circular logic designed to keep the evidence hidden, and watchdog groups are furious. Organizations like American Oversight are now suing to force the report's release. They're arguing that Cannon's order only heightens the need for transparency about what Trump did with national security secrets. Because if the evidence is so damning that even showing it to Congress would prejudice Trump, what does that tell you about what's in there? Here's what we know about the documents case from public reporting. Trump took boxes of classified materials to Mar-a-Lago, hundreds of documents, including some of the highest classification levels, stuff about nuclear capabilities, military plans, intelligence sources. When the National Archives asked for them back, Trump's team dragged their feet. When the FBI finally got a subpoena, Trump's lawyers allegedly obstructed the investigation, moving boxes, hiding documents, lying about what was still there. When the FBI finally executed a search warrant, they found classified documents everywhere, in Trump's office, in a storage room, in a bathroom. The obstruction was blatant. The security failures were catastrophic, and all of that is presumably documented in Smith's sealed report, a report that Congress can't see, that the public can't see, that journalists can't FOIA. It's locked away for now. But how long does that last? Because that report is another bomb waiting to go off. And here's the thing about Smith's strategy that Trump's people really hate. It's not just about future federal prosecution. Smith's reports can be used by state prosecutors too, by congressional investigators, by civil litigants, by historians and journalists. The evidence is out there now in the public record, and it can be weaponized in all kinds of ways. Georgia's already got its own election interference case against Trump. Other states could bring charges related to the fake electors. Congress could launch new investigations using Smith's roadmap. This is about creating a permanent record that can never be fully erased or dismissed. And Smith did that. He made sure that even if Trump serves out his term and walks away, the evidence of what he did stays on the books, ready to be used against him. The New York Times piece about Smith moving from defense to counterattack is revealing about his mindset. Smith isn't hiding. He's not trying to fade into the background. According to the reporting, he's told associates he welcomes the chance to lay out his case in public hearings and briefs. He wants the evidence to be public. He wants the legal arguments to be tested. He wants the historical record to reflect what he found. And he's positioning himself as the guy who did everything right, who built airtight cases, who followed the evidence, who only stopped because the law required it. That's powerful positioning. Because if future prosecutors or congressional committees bring this back up, Smith's there to say, I already did the work. Here's the evidence. Here's how you prosecute it. This is a long-term play, and Smith's in it for the duration. So what does this all mean for Trump right now? On the surface, he's safe, he's president, he's got immunity, he can't be prosecuted while he's in office. But underneath, he's sitting on top of a legal volcano that could erupt the second he leaves. Every day he's in office is another day. The evidence sits there, waiting. Every speech he gives, every policy he pushes, every scandal that erupts, it's all happening with this sword hanging over his head. The knowledge that in 2029, or whenever his presidency ends, all of this could come roaring back. The charges could be refiled, the trials could happen. And this time there's no immunity to hide behind. Smith made sure of that. He preserved everything, locked it in, made it permanent, and turned Trump's victory into a temporary reprieve instead of a final win. Okay, Let's break down what actually matters here, because there's a lot of legal complexity and political noise, and we need to cut through it. Point 1. Jack Smith didn't lose, he repositioned, and that repositioning might end up being more dangerous for Trump than the original prosecutions. Think about what Smith accomplished. He documented everything. He got it into the public record. He preserved the right to refile charges. He positioned Trump's immunity as temporary, not permanent. And he created a blueprint that future prosecutors can follow step by step. That's not a loss. That's a strategic retreat that sets up the next battle. And Trump knows it. That's why his lawyers are still talking about this. That's why they're still trying to discredit Smith and his reports. Because they know the threat hasn't gone away. It's just waiting. The brilliance of the without prejudice dismissal can't be overstated. In legal terms, there are two ways to dismiss a case. With prejudice means it's over forever. The charges can never be brought again. Without prejudice means it's paused. The charges can be refiled if circumstances change. Smith fought to make sure his dismissals were without prejudice. He explicitly told the court that Trump's immunity is temporary and that prosecution could resume when he leaves office. That means everything Smith built, all the evidence, all the witness testimony, all the legal theories, is still alive. It's in stasis, but it's not dead. And the moment Trump's presidency ends, all of it can come back. That's a time bomb with a very specific timer. And everyone in Trump world knows exactly when it's set to go off. Point 2. The Supreme Court's immunity ruling is the gift that keeps on giving for Smith. When the Supreme Court ruled that presidents have broad immunity for official acts, Trump celebrated. His lawyers claimed total victory. But what the court actually did was create massive ambiguity about what happens after a presidency ends. The ruling protects Trump while he's in office, but it doesn't clearly protect him afterward. And Smith's filings exploit that ambiguity brilliantly. By arguing that immunity is temporary and case-specific to Trump's current position, Smith is setting up the legal argument that post-presidency Trump is fair game. And here's the thing. The Supreme Court might have given Trump immunity for now, but they also might have set him up for prosecution later, because if the immunity is tied to the office and not the person, then the moment Trump's not in that office anymore, the immunity vanishes. This is why legal experts are calling Smith's strategy brilliant. He turned the Supreme Court's immunity ruling from a shield into a ticking clock. Trump's protected now, but the protection has an expiration date, and Smith made sure everyone knows it. Future prosecutors don't have to relitigate whether Trump can be charged. Smith already laid out the argument. They just have to wait for the immunity to expire, and then use Smith's roadmap to refile. It's plug-and-play prosecution, and that's terrifying for anyone in Trump's orbit who's implicated in these cases, because they're not presidents. They don't have immunity. And if Trump gets prosecuted after leaving office, everyone around him becomes a potential cooperating witness trying to cut deals. The lawyers, the advisors, the officials who went along with the schemes, they're all vulnerable. And Smith's reports name them, describe their actions, document their involvement. That's leverage. That's pressure. And it doesn't go away. Point 3. The sealed documents report is a massive unknown hanging over everything. We don't know what's in Volume 2 of Smith's report, but we know Judge Cannon sealed it. We know she blocked even Congress from seeing it. And we know watchdog groups are suing to force it open. That tells you something. If the report was exculpatory, if it cleared Trump or showed the documents case was weak, why would Cannon seal it? The fact that it's locked away suggests it's damaging, potentially more damaging than the election interference report. And that makes sense. The documents case was always more straightforward, less political ambiguity, clearer criminal statutes. Trump took classified documents, refused to return them, allegedly obstructed the investigation. That's textbook. And if Smith's report lays out evidence of all that in detail, it could be devastating. And here's what makes the sealed report even more important. If it eventually gets released, and these things usually do eventually, it becomes another piece of the permanent record, another bomb that can detonate at any time. Maybe it gets unsealed through litigation. Maybe a future Congress forces it open. Maybe it leaks. But once it's public, it can be used by prosecutors, by investigators, by Trump's political opponents. The fact that it exists and that Trump's allies work so hard to keep it hidden, that tells you everything about how dangerous they think it is. Point 4. This is about legacy as much as prosecution. Even if Trump never gets prosecuted after leaving office, even if political wins or legal barriers prevent charges from being refiled, Smith's reports accomplish something critical. They established a historical record. 50 years from now, when historians write about this era, they're going to cite Jack Smith's reports as primary source evidence for what Trump did. The election interference, the classified documents, the obstruction, all of it will be documented in official DOJ reports written by a special counsel who investigated for years and compiled evidence that he said compelled prosecution. That's how Trump gets remembered, not as the president who beat the charges, but as the president who committed crimes serious enough to compel prosecution and only escaped accountability because he managed to get reelected and hide behind presidential immunity. Trump cares about legacy He cares about how he's remembered. But Smith's reports undercut all of that. They say in official government documents with hundreds of pages of evidence that Trump committed serious federal crimes, that he tried to overturn an election, that he mishandled national security secrets, that he obstructed justice. And those reports aren't going away. They're part of the permanent record now, archived, cited, referenced, used in every future book and documentary and historical analysis of this period. Smith might not get to prosecute Trump, but he did get to write the first draft of history. And that draft says Trump's a criminal who used presidential immunity to avoid accountability. So where does this leave us? Trump's in office, temporarily safe, but the clock is ticking. In 2029, assuming he serves out his full term, the immunity expires, and everything Smith documented can come back. The charges, the trials, the potential convictions, maybe some future attorney general will decide not to prosecute. There are a lot of variables, but here's what's not variable. The evidence exists. The legal roadmap exists. The without prejudice dismissals exist, and the precedent of a former president being prosecuted for crimes committed in office, that's now on the table in a way it never was before. Smith made sure of that. For Trump's allies and potential co-conspirators, this is nightmare fuel because they don't have presidential immunity. They can be prosecuted right now, and if prosecutors want to build cases against them, Smith's reports are the starting point. Everything they need is documented. Names, actions, meetings, it's all there. So even if Trump skates, the people around him might not, and that creates pressure to cooperate, to distance themselves. That fracturing, that's dangerous for Trump too, because if his allies start flipping or distancing or contradicting him to save themselves, his entire defense starts to crumble. This is the long game. Smith's playing chess while Trump's playing checkers. Trump thinks he won because the cases got dismissed, but Smith knows the game isn't over until Trump's out of office and the statute of limitations runs out. And even then, the historical record is permanent. What Smith built doesn't disappear just because Trump's president again. It waits, it persists, and is ready to be used whenever the opportunity arises. That's the counterattack. That's the strategy. And Trump can't do anything to stop it while he's in office, which must drive him absolutely crazy. Because for once, there's a threat he can't tweet away or bully away. It's just sitting there, waiting, ticking down. And that's where we are. Jack Smith dropped the bombshell. Trump world is in chaos, trying to figure out how to defuse it. And the clock is running on Trump's temporary immunity. 4 years might seem like a long time, but in legal terms, it's nothing. And everything Smith documented comes back into play the second that clock runs out. This story isn't over, not even close. It's just entering a new chapter. And the ending? We'll see. But Jack Smith made sure the evidence will be there, ready and waiting whenever that ending finally comes.